Hey everybody, we are moving into chapter 3 here this week, and we're going to be taking a look at some non-psychological perspectives and factors involved in career development. And so when we say non-psychological, really what we mean is outside of the individual. So in the counseling environment, we're often dealing with one person or a very small group of people. Maybe a high school guidance counselor might work with a small group of students at one time. But typically we're working with one person or a few individuals, and we're looking at their specific interests and traits and abilities and aptitudes, and then helping them to select a job or a career path. Now, looking at the sociological and economic factors involved here in different relevant perspectives, we're moving outside of that individualistic perspective. So from that sociological standpoint, we're going to be taking a look at some of the bigger picture cultural factors involved here, and we'll also take a look at some of the economic factors involved. So who's getting paid what? So is it one particular group making more or less than the other? And spoiler alert, yes, and you probably are right in whatever your assumption is. So we will get to that in a few moments here. But first, let's talk about kind of the big picture here for this chapter. Really what we're going to be getting at a lot of the time here is the inequities in the labor market. So how are things not fair? How are things not set up for everyone to have that equal opportunity that we want everyone to have? So a lot of employers will say, we are an equal opportunity employer. And it sounds nice to say, equal opportunity housing, equal opportunity employment. It sounds nice. America, the land of, we want to say equal opportunity, but really it's just opportunity. And a lot of times we expect people to overcome systems and things that were not of their choosing to take advantage of some of those opportunities. So really the problem here is that not everyone is born into the same kind of opportunity, meaning our family situations don't always set us up with the same kind of finances or the same school districts or the same family values around things like education or work, or even just having a family. So what are our gender expectations from our families and from our culture? So all of these things tend to contribute to how we view jobs in the labor market and our long-term trajectory of our careers. So we're going to be taking a look at a few different elements here. We'll take a look at youth, we'll take a look at status attainment theory and some various elements within that are important. We'll take a look at how the labor market is structured, just talked about that a little bit. And then we'll take a look at discrimination in a couple different areas here for women and minorities. Okay, so we touched on this a little bit here, but some things that come out statistically here, just something to think about: increased demand for low-paying personal service occupations. So one of the things we're thinking about here is like an in-home care nurse. Huge demand for these, and especially as we take a look at baby boomers becoming part of the retirement age group. So as our baby boomers, our largest population in America, our largest segment of the population, as it moves out of the workforce over the next couple of decades here, really what we're looking at is people who are going to need a lot of help, a lot of medical care, a lot of in-home medical care. So those jobs aren't typically very high paying. Even if you are technically a nurse, you're not working in the hospital environment. You're working with one person, and that may be seen as being less demanding perhaps, and so you may get paid less there. So jobs like that are going to be in increasing demand. So people need to fill those jobs, and they don't pay a lot of money. So people will get hired for those, and maybe they'll be less qualified or maybe just less satisfied with their work because that's not what they pictured when they signed up in nursing school. Greater separation between executive and labor salaries. I mean, this is something that's always a concern. So the separation of the wealthiest and the middle class, and then the middle class from the lower class or the impoverished classes. Racial discrimination, gender discrimination. We'll talk a little bit about these toward the end of the chapter today. Lack of loyalty by employers, and I would also throw in here lack of loyalty by employees. It's very common nowadays to have people moving in and out of jobs, to have employers hiring new new employees pretty regularly and just having higher turnover in jobs. Gone seem to be the days where you sign up with a company and you start at the factory floor and you work to middle management. You kind of hang out there for 20, 30 years, maybe take on an upper level management position and grab a gold watch after 35 years of service, and you get yourself a nice pension, right? That's not really the way things work in America anymore in most companies. A lot more movement, and really that's seen as an advantage by a lot of people, but unfortunately that can also be a disadvantage factor for a lot of employees. Another thing to consider here is technology. As technology advances, the gap between the haves and the have-nots is just necessarily going to widen, because to use the technology that's being developed in the workforce is either going to push out the lowest segment of our labor population as people get replaced by machines or software applications. I mean, I think Lowe's was developing robot shopping, personal shoppers. McDonald's now has automated ordering. You can order from an app for your pizza. I mean, there are all kinds of ways that people are being replaced. And so if you're not developing that software, you're going to be on the other end of that, getting pushed out of your job. So a lot of unfortunate factors here that some are a matter of fairness and a matter of social change that needs to happen, and some are just a matter of a change in the way the world does business. And so that's just necessarily going to require people to have different skill sets in order to be successful in the workforce. So our first group we're going to take a look at here as we look at some of these inequities in the labor market is youth. So a lot of research studies will define youth as around age 15 to age 24. In the mental health field, we sometimes call this group transitional age youth. So if you work in a TAY or transitional age youth center, you're looking at kind of the 15 to 25-ish age range here. So now, the youth, the people in this age range are often students. So we're looking at high school students up through college students, and a lot of times people will nowadays kind of spread out their college over several years, more than just the traditional 4 years, so that they can work and support themselves as we move further away from a traditional college culture where you show up, you live on campus, you attend for 4 years, and your parents pay for it, and you move on to a job. Now, oftentimes people are splitting their time 50-50 between work and school, or even just kind of squeezing in school on the side, maybe taking night classes or exclusively online classes. So the education sphere has changed as well, partly to accommodate this, and I think that's a good thing for those students who are caught in this difficult place of, do I want to advance myself educationally, or do I want to be in school? So that choice has become a little bit easier. But when we look at this TAY population, this youth population, a lot of times the jobs that are available for people who are still in school are part-time. So you're not going to make a lot of money doing that. Typically part-time work pays less. The quality of the work is often less. It's usually pretty tedious. You're often not working the hours you'd want to, maybe working when everyone else is out having fun, working weekends and holidays. So it's really not the ideal work situation. And the youth tend to be underemployed, and part of this may be because of discrimination. So people on the other end of the working spectrum, those at the seniors age bracket, are going to be seen as having more experience, and certainly that is going to be true for a lot of them. They've been around the block a lot of times. Now, there can also be discrimination at that end of the age spectrum. So ageism goes both ways. But youth definitely get the short end of the stick a lot of times when it comes to employment, because they're seen as either expendable, or that they're going to leave, that they can get pushed around because they're willing to accept a lower wage. So unfortunately, youth do not often end up in quality jobs or jobs that are going to lead to upward mobility. When we take a look at how can we counsel youth in terms of finding jobs, the sociological perspective is helpful here for us. So we want to not only get a sense for what do you want to do. So if you're counseling a high school junior who's getting ready to decide, do I want to apply for college next fall, or do I want to start looking at jobs? We want them to start thinking, what kind of work do I want to do? What is my attitude toward work? Is it just a job to me? Is work something that should be fulfilling? Is it something that is heavily value laden because of my family background? Do I want to work with others, or do I want to work solo? So a lot of questions we want to ask about work itself. We need to know about work demands. We want to help them understand what are the demands of jobs, and what do salaries look like? How much money feels like a lot of money to you? So that's going to change throughout their life as they take on new financial responsibilities. But there's a great dialogue. Let me see if I can find it in your text here. Chapter 3, page 72 in... at least in my instructor's edition here of the 6th edition. Great dialogue here of a young gal who's working at, I want to say it's a fast food restaurant, and she's saying, I'm finally able to buy the clothes that I want. I'm finally feeling like I have some control over my life. But then she's also recognizing that the other people who are working with her can barely read and write. They can barely do basic math. I can't tell you how many times I've personally watched a cashier struggle when the machine is down, and I give them, the extra penny so that I get a quarter back instead of 24 cents, and they just have a hard time with that. And so in this dialogue, this gal is noticing people struggling like that, and her counselor walks her through a series of questions, kind of a Socratic dialogue, if you will, to help her take a look at what are my expectations about work. What are my expectations about money? Do I want to go farther in life? Do I want to surpass my mother's level of achievement in her career? So all good questions to ask, and all of these get at not only what am I able to do, what are my traits, and what am I capable of. We'll talk more about that over the next couple of weeks. But also, what are my beliefs and values about work? What has my family and my culture taught me about this? And so we can talk with them about advantages and disadvantages of different kinds of work. And when we say part-time and full-time work, we're not just talking about fast food jobs here, or working at the Gap. Faculty positions are a great example, I think, of this. My wife actually she likes to say she's a full-time mom and a part-time instructor. So she has a PhD in molecular genetics and teaches anatomy and physiology and molecular and cell biology, but at a part-time level. And so the pay is a lot better, of course, for an adjunct instructor than it is for adjunct McDonald's cashier. And that's not to say anything negative about McDonald's cashiers. It's just there's a different level of education that goes into one than the other. And frankly, I think the cashier job may actually be more demanding. So, we can't really say one way or another which is a harder job, but we can say one requires more education. And fewer people are going to be qualified to do that. So when we talk about part-time and full-time work, it's a more complex discussion than we might think right away. So we want to make sure to have those big picture discussions when we're counseling these, because they may not have had that discussion with anybody before. It may have just been, do you want to go to college or not? And if they're already thinking, I don't really like school, they may start limiting themselves because they've decided, I don't like this one piece of what it takes to get to the thing that I really want to do. All right, so something we want to think about, regardless of the age of the person we're working with, is what kind of work are you looking to do, and how is that going to impact you as a person? How is it going to impact your ability maybe to relate to other people? So we just talked about maybe the difference between being an adjunct instructor and being a cashier at a fast food restaurant. The work environment is substantially different here for those two jobs. So they both involve a similar type of work each week. but the actual work that you're doing is going to vary greatly in those two positions. So when I think about my wife's anatomy and physiology course, she teaches that course at one school and teaches molecular and cell biology at another school, and that's her work for the week. And it's probably about 20 hours maybe or so worth of work between home and on-campus work. And let's say if you work the same 20 hours as a cashier at a fast food restaurant, the work environment is very different, not only because of the place where you are and the people you're working with, but also the actual tasks you're completing. So while my wife might be preparing lectures and labs for students to complete and to attend, there's a lot of variation, and there's a different topic every week, versus a cashier who's pushing the exact same buttons, helping people order the exact same food, standing in the exact same spot for hours. So think about the impact that would have on a person. You're not being intellectually challenged. You're doing the same thing over and over, and you can see all around you a lot of people who aren't going anywhere career-wise. Versus as an adjunct instructor, there's a chance to maybe take on full-time employment someday, or to have a different kind of job that's also intellectually fulfilling because you've created those opportunities through education for yourself. So your job itself is more meaningful perhaps because you're seeing people's lives change for the better as they get educated and are able to take on better jobs themselves. You're being personally challenged to deliver material in an interesting way, to come up with new lab activities that will make something more meaningful or memorable for someone. It may be exciting because hopefully you're teaching something that you're interested in, right? So if you get a doctorate, hopefully it's in something that you care about in life. So if you're in a master's program, it's hopefully something that you want to do and not just a box to check on your to-do list in life. So think about the different impacts that will have on the person. And so if you're being challenged, if your job is exciting or at least interesting to you, you're probably going to feel a lot better about yourself and where your life is going than if you're feeling stuck, literally in a physical place, but also intellectually. So very different impacts on the person. All right, so I started to kind of allude to this when talking here about the work environment, and part of that is that working in a school is an intellectually exciting or challenging place, and so when we look at human capital theory, the idea here with human capital theory is that people advance themselves by gaining capital. When we think about venture capitalism, we think about capitalists are people who invest money. Venture capitalists invest money in projects with other people. So a show that I used to enjoy watching with my wife when we were looking for a house was Flip or Flop. And there's a couple who I think they're getting divorced now, but friendly couple, cute kids, live in Southern California, and they would flip houses. They'd buy foreclosures, short sales, etc. at auction and flip them and sell them for a profit, and that was their job. And so one of the things that this couple would need during some of the episodes, if they bought a property that cost more or they needed a more substantial renovation than they had planned, they would talk to an investor, a partner who would invest some capital in their project, meaning they'd get a chunk of money from this person, typically at a pretty high interest rate every day or every month. But it would allow them to do their job and then to make some money. So when we think about that, think about human capital. So what skills do you have? What education, what training do you have? What life experiences do you have that allow you to complete your activities at your job? These are the pieces of capital that you have gained over the years. And so there's a couple different takes here on human capital theory. And so one of these is that education, training, work, and whatever else is part of your package that you bring to the table equals greater money, greater dollars for you. And then modified human capital theory means that we take all of those same things and they may lead to greater satisfaction. So the idea here is that the harder you work, the more education you get, the more you pour into yourself or invest in yourself, meaning gaining capital for yourself, the more either money you can make or the better satisfied you will be, regardless of what kind of money you're making. And so when I talk with students and do career counseling, especially for undergraduate students, one of the things I talk with them about is the cost of graduate school. And so I left my doctoral program with $103,000 in loans, and that may seem like a lot, but that was including about $12,000 from undergrad, and the rest was from graduate school. And I was fortunate that I didn't have to take out personal loans to live on, and a lot of people will do that as well during graduate school. So I consider myself actually to have gotten off easy with only $100,000 in loans, and so I make a pretty substantial payment on that every month. But what I always tell students is that it allows me to have two jobs that I love. So I love teaching and I love doing therapy. And so I always tell them, I could have skipped graduate school and just gotten a job with my bachelor's and had a more limited range of things that I could do, maybe be a behavioral aide or a mental health specialist somewhere, a case manager, and I would have just been more limited in my options, and I probably wouldn't have enjoyed those things as much. So I could have done that with my bachelor's degree and foregone the $80 or whatever $1,000 it cost me to get a doctoral degree. But since I went ahead and did that, I have two jobs that I love, and that pay me okay. I get to pay for my kids' preschool, and I have a backyard for them, right? So they allow me to do those things, even though I have a pretty hefty student loan payment. And so one of the things I'll consider with them is, what is your goal with your job? Are you just wanting a job? Are you wanting to have work just to have work, or do you want your work to be satisfying to you? And when you think 20 years down the road, what do you picture yourself doing? Is it the same thing, or do you see that you want to grow in your job? So in that sense, I'm going to say, let's invest in your human capital. Let's fill your human bank account so that you can spend that later on in careers and have more satisfaction. But one little caveat I want to throw out there is, as we talk about gender in a couple of minutes here, gender inequality in the workplace, an important thing we have to keep in mind is that, especially with my female undergraduate students and those that are thinking about taking on significant student loans to, say, become a marriage and family therapist, for instance, I'll ask them, are you planning to work full-time, or at least enough to pay off your own loans? Because if not, this may not be a good path for you, because there is a substantial financial commitment, and you may not be willing to, in the long term, work enough to pay that off if you're planning to have children. And I'm personally really glad that my wife is not working full time. It's what she wanted. I'm glad that she's really happy. And as much as it's nice to have double income, I'm much happier having kids than having a double income. And that's just my own personal value. There's a therapist that I've networked with at times, and she works with what she calls DINKs, double income, no kids. And these people have marriage problems just like everybody else, and she specializes in working with them. And I'm happy to not be one of those couples. I'd rather be a single income or kind of time and a half income, and with kids. It's just what I value. So when I talk with students and I'm counseling students on what they might want to do for their careers, that's something I explore with them is, are you planning to have kids? If so, who's going to be taking care of them? If it's you, is getting the really expensive master's degree in a professional field really the best option for you at this point? Or should you maybe wait until you can take advantage of that and not have the school loans for now? So we'll move on. I don't want to belabor that, but just something to think about when we're counseling individuals. Okay, so the structure of the labor market is important to think about here, and this is where we again start to see some of those inequities. So the primary labor market, these are the jobs that you are getting ready to apply for. The skilled labor, the more advanced training, advanced technology, higher wages, hopefully. And again, with any field, there's going to be a lot of variety in these things, but the median or middle wage is going to be higher for these. And And so we're going to see some differences between this and our secondary or peripheral jobs here, where it doesn't take a lot of skill, or it's a skill that's easily learned. There's very little training. You don't make very much, and people don't tend to stay in those jobs for a long time. So a lot of turnover. Part of the reason for that is you hit the ceiling really quickly. So there's just nowhere to go. So when we're talking with people, we want to say, what kind of job do you see yourself in? What do you feel capable of? What are you interested in? And some people may be really happy with a secondary job. So we got to be careful about our assumptions here about folks. And we don't want them to feel pressured into anything, but we want to make sure that they've thought through their options here. And they need to know that if they don't invest in, again, this human capital idea here, then they're likely going to be stuck in one of these secondary jobs. And by the way, one thing that I forgot to mention here with human capital theory, is the assumption here that everybody has equal access to the labor market. And as we mentioned earlier, that is definitely not the case. Not everybody is born under the same star, if you will, and not everybody's able to, quote unquote, pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. I mean, that's the idea of the immigrant parent coming in with just the clothes on their back and a dream and becoming a millionaire. And yes, that happens, but it's a rare thing, and it's just because the cards are stacked against people. So that's this idea of status attainment theory, wherein people essentially we can really predict what people are going to do with their lives and what kind of job they might have, what kind of wage they're going to earn by just looking at what their parents do. And used to be we could just look at what the father did. But there's some great research out there, sad research, but well done, that tells us that we're unlikely really to surpass our parents. So one of my favorite moments at each graduation ceremony that I attend is when the dean or the president of the school asks, who here is the first to go to college or to finish college? And it's amazing to me nowadays how many hands we see fly up in the air for students who they're the first in their school to get a college degree. And then that number seems to go even higher when we get to the graduate degrees. And I think part of that is we're making education more accessible for people. Just the fact that you are watching this video tells me that you are aware of how education is more accessible. So you're doing this online. You're able to do distance learning and to do this on your own time and have a job that supports your family and maybe be one of those first people to get a graduate degree in your family. I imagine that at least one of the people in our class here is one of those people that is going above what social attainment theory would say that they're capable, status attainment theory says that they're capable of doing or likely to do. So kudos to you if you're that person. But just bear that assumption in mind when we talk about human capital theory, because for some people, as much as they train themselves and get additional education and volunteer and work experience and have life experience and personality traits, they may face discrimination because they're a woman or they're a minority or their parents were a certain person. So we have to bear all of those things in mind when we're counseling individuals. All right, so we talked about the structure of the labor market. Let's talk a little more here about discrimination. So I'm going to talk about women, and we'll finish up our last slide by talking about minorities in the workplace. So for women, unfortunately, as much as we've started to close the gender wage gap, and there's a video you guys are going to watch this week on that as well, but as much as we've started to close that, and it's nice to see it moving in the right direction, really that shouldn't exist. For someone with the same skills and the same dedication to the job, the same capabilities and getting the same results, there should be the same pay, right? I mean, just if you were blindfolded and deaf and couldn't hear or see the person and you just knew they sold X number of widgets to people, you should pay them the same, right? But unfortunately, that's not the case, and especially in sales jobs. So tech jobs, professional jobs, less of a gap, but still there's an employment gap, but also a pay gap as well, a wage gap. So there's a lot here working against women in the workplace, and a lot of that's cultural. Our cultural assumptions about women. We saw after World War II that Rosie Riveter, the women called out of the kitchens into the factories were sent back to the kitchens after being shown this great new world where they could have a different option. There's nothing wrong with being in the kitchen and raising your kids. That's, a lot of men are choosing that nowadays. Nothing wrong with that, but it's a choice. We want it to be a choice, and to have the choice to do something else if you like, to either not have kids or to have kids and have someone else take care of them, and maybe your partner stays home or you hire a nanny or an au pair or whatever. But we want it to be a choice, and if you make that choice to work, you should get paid the same. And that's not the case. So there are fewer options for women in a lot of cases because they just aren't seen as hireable for certain jobs. And women also do tend to statistically move in and out of the workforce more regularly than men, often because of having children. And when their children are sick, they're often the one that stays home with them. So just seen as less reliable employees in some cases. So kind of like youth in a sense. So they may be expected to be or assumed to be a less reliable employee. So really unfortunate in a lot of those ways there. And the last point we see here, that there are some men entering jobs in the service sector that were previously held by women. So either being secretaries and even in some of the professional realms. So more male nurses nowadays. So, just as much as we see women moving into the workforce more, we also have men moving into some jobs that were traditionally held by women. So it's still a rough situation for women in the workforce, and so we want to make sure that we're talking up our female counselees and making sure that they are aware of the discrimination they may face, the difficulties they're going to face, and talk with them about ways they want to overcome this. And then finally here, really, again, some unfortunate numbers here, a lot of inequity in what we see here between white employees and non-white employees or minorities. And the author of the text here makes a point at the very beginning that when we say minorities, we're worldwide, whites are a minority statistically. But in America, what we're talking about is essentially non-white employees or potential employees in some of these cases here. So some unfortunate stats here that we see. The unemployment rate for African Americans and Latinos is greater than the rates for Asians and Caucasians. When we look at the pay rate for if we use a white male as kind of the 100%, the average mark, Asian males tend to make more than white men, and everyone else seems to make less. So if we set white men as the bar there, we're really falling short as a society in that we're not paying or hiring others as much as we are white men. So that's just kind of across the board there, the inequality. So we still see that, and social psychology has borne this out for years, for decades, but we still see that there is discrimination even if everything else is equal other than skin color. We still see that there's discrimination against non-white applicants. And the similar studies have been done here with men and women. If we change the name on an essay, it'll get a lower score if it's a woman. Same kinds of things here when we have applicants that are white and applicants that are of a minority racial status. So fewer, if you get African American male and a white male and they both apply for a job, the white male is more likely to get a callback and more likely to get the job, and then of course also more likely to get paid more according to the numbers we see. So there's just something very wrong with that picture, and a lot of that is culturally bound. So we still have a lot of racial stereotypes that are around. So racism is not dead. It's very much alive still. It's just a lot more subtle. And we see it in these ways that are statistically borne out. But as much as a lot of workplaces will advertise that they're an equal opportunity employer, we obviously don't see that actually coming to fruition in the workplace. So a lot of work to be done here as a society. So as we kind of step back and look at this from a sociocultural perspective and from an economic perspective, we see there's a lot that our counselees may have to overcome, especially if they are a young and or female and or non-white applicant. So keep all these things in mind, and be an encourager for your counselees and help them identify their strengths. I mean, if we're going to do anything for anybody that falls into one of these categories, it's to help them have faith in themselves when the system doesn't, and to find ways to portray their strengths, and to invest in themselves to overcome whatever weaknesses they may have, any shortcomings that they may have. All right, guys, that is all for this video. So take care, and hopefully my voice will be back online next week for you. Getting a little hoarse here at the end. All right, take care, guys. Bye-bye.